Today's seminar is going to be on computing audio, and we're going to be talking about we're going to look at this from a different angle. The last few years we've done seminars where we've talked about how to set up your computer and how to get sound out of it. But today we want to look at the broader picture of things. I've assembled a panel of very interesting people here. Everybody on this panel has a foot in high-end audio, but also everybody in this panel has a foot in a bigger enterprise outside of specialty audio. Joe Harley is Senior Vice President of AudioQuest for product development and handles marketing as well. His night job is he's a recording engineer. He's produced a lot of phenomenal records and CDs. Chris Connaker came from IT, big enterprise IT, and started computeraudiophile.com. Matt Ashland is one of the co-conspirators over at J River. But and we all know about Media Center. Anybody here who's done computer audio has either tried Media Center or they've at least heard about it. But Matt's organization does a lot of significant work with some pretty big companies outside of what you see with J River. Gordon Rankin, prior to becoming a computer audio genius, he was a computer genius. Fifth largest computer manufacturer in the world, Gordon? Sixth, sorry. Sixth largest computer manufacturer in the world at one time. Matt Green, also a music and audiophile enthusiast, works at Logitech, which is the owner of Ultimate Ears, and they used to have slim devices, the streaming devices. And John Atkinson, most of you probably have not heard of John. He's new to the industry. He's got a small but very spirited magazine called Stereophile. Yeah. They mostly write about 8-track, but recently they got into computer audio as well. So it's a really interesting group. We've got everybody on this panel is a music lover and enthusiast, but they also have a bigger world perspective on what's happening outside. So it'd be kind of an interesting spirited discussion. So I actually want to start with Joe Harley. And Joe Harley, the first question I have for you is, there's a lot of conversation here. People come to the show and they want to talk about DSD, DXD, 32.384. They want to have debates over which file format is the best file format. But in the real world, outside of the Rocky Mountain Audio Fest, we're seeing companies like Sony entering into specialty hardware. They just had a big press release where they're going to be making some computer audio products. We've got iTunes sitting on a treasure trove of 24-bit files. We've got HD tracks. All of these new startup companies coming. We hear about Neil Young's Pono. Where do you think music files for the masses are going to be going? Right now we're in this 256, 320 kilobyte per second world. But where do you see, not just our world, not the audiophiles, not people who are looking for DSD, but where do you see the broad consumer? Where do you see the music they're going to be purchasing? Where do you see that evolving to?
Oh, I think it's all going to go back to turntables.
Yes. By the way, Joe is producer of the Blue Note 45 RPMs.
And it's going to go to 45 strictly, and then mono only. No. No, it's what's cool is that we're starting to see an awareness in popular culture, and I think it's not just I notice it, but I'm kind of looking for it. But I think we all notice that there's 5 years ago, nobody talked, amongst civilians, not people here, about there anything wrong with MP3. I'd talk to friends of mine that had MP3s, and they're like, it's fine with me. I don't hear any noise. It's fine. Now you're starting to hear a lot more awareness that there's something better. And all the companies, the record companies are aware of this. They've all been hard at work at transferring their files. As Steve said, there's awareness from Sony, Pono, Neil Young's been out there beating the bush about high-res audio. And you can tell something is building here. Something is starting to happen. And it's exciting. It's like we have our best shot, I think, at really bringing an awareness to whether it's 1644 or high res or whatever it is, but something better than just MP3. So it's pretty exciting.
So I two follow-up questions for you. iTunes is sitting on a treasure trove
Right.
of 2444 and 2448 files.
Mm.
The iPhones, the iPads, the iPods, all of these devices can do up to 2448.
Yep.
Do you think that Apple is got something up their sleeve where they're going to eventually upgrade? I mean, this is crystal ball. But do you think iTunes will eventually start to offer a premium file download?
Yes. We've heard, I mean, I have most of my personal work was with EMI and now with Universal because they bought EMI. We've heard a lot of chatter about iTunes turning on 2448 relatively soon. I don't know what the schedule is, but I think if and when I don't think it's an if, I think when they do that, it's going to change our world significantly. And we can talk about, well, that's only 48. But to civilians, the difference between MP3s and 2448 or 20, whatever it is, they don't care about numbers. But the difference in quality is huge, huge. It's enormous. Any idiot can hear the difference. That's going to be a big deal. I think that's going to be a very big deal.
And then the final question I had, you mentioned Pono and Neil Young. What effect do you think that had? Neil Young going on Letterman and going on Jon Stewart and talking about how bad MP3s are and how good music can be. What kind of effect do you think that had both on the person watching TV at home, but also did it have an effect on people running Warner Brothers and Sony Music and things like that? Is Neil Young this catalyst that's sort of propelling a new conversation, or is he just a small piece in a big conversation?
No, he's all of us who were part of the sort of the SACD attempt at revolution some years ago. The one thing we didn't have at that time was a whole passel of artists promoting us. What Neil's got is a ton of artists. I've watched a video that keeps growing every time I see it. The last time I saw it, it was 30 minutes long or 40 minutes long. And there isn't a popular artist that I can think of that wasn't on this video saying, do you like my music? Well, you haven't heard it. If you're listening in MP3, you haven't heard it. And they've got all this stuff. I mean, from Paul McCartney to Foo Fighters and bands I've never heard of, but a lot of people you have heard of, Dylan, you name it. When they start using that as a promotion, I think a lot of people are going to pay attention. And it's going to, the things that all of us here sort of take for granted. We know MP3s aren't so hot. We know you can do a lot better, but I think we're going to have a whole lot of company very soon, which is pretty cool.
Thanks, Joe. The next round of questions I want to sort of address towards John Atkinson. So 20 years ago, I got into high-end audio. I started working at Listen Up, which is here in Denver. And the gold standard at our store for electronics brands at that time was Mark Levinson. 20 years ago, Mark Levinson was really the dominant solid-state player in our market. And the guy that ran the company, ran sales there, a guy named Dave Knobber, was doing a seminar at the store where I worked, and they were introducing a pretty groundbreaking product for its day. It was, I think it was called the 3031, the CD Transport and DAC. And at the time, this is 20 years ago, this is a CD Transport and DAC that I think were $26,000 20 years ago. And one of the questions that a person had asked in the audience is, what is the mandate for a high-end audio company? What is a high-end audio company supposed to do? And Dave Knobber's immediate response was, a high-end audio company, their mandate is to look at and address what the masses want to use as a source, what they want to use as a medium to listen to music. And a high-end audio company's job then is to make the best product possible for how people want to consume their music. And so it was pretty simple 20 years ago. You either listen to CDs or you listen to vinyl. and it was pretty straightforward. The world's changed so much now through computer audio, and what we define as a computer is changing radically too. So it seems like it took the industry and it took the magazines a long time to catch up with computer audio. iTunes goes live in 2001, and we really don't see products being manufactured or products being reviewed or the category itself being taken seriously until about 5 or 6 years later. So getting to a question, or getting to the question. So now with computers changing, right? Phones are now a computer. In Hong Kong, you can buy a phone that has 4 gig of RAM, 128 gigabyte of memory. It uses a 2-point-odd gigahertz processor. Phones are now becoming a relevant part of how people want to listen to music. How is a magazine like Stereophile or any magazine, how responsive do you need to be now, and how do you decide to dedicate the resources to using all these different devices that people want to use to listen to music and figuring out the best way to get sound out of them?
Great question. To go back to the Levinson, I think I respect Dave Norber. I think he got it slightly wrong. That you have to be not addressing what people are doing now as a manufacturer, but you have to be more like Steve Jobs, who said, I'm not going to sell people what they tell me they want now. I'm going to sell them what they're going to tell me they want next year or the year after. And the Levinson's interesting because, yes, the 3031 was a dedicated CD transport processor, but 5 years after the 30's launch, they upgraded it. It could handle 24-bit, 88.2, 96 kilohertz files, even though there was almost no source for that right then. So they were looking at the future, saying, well, high-res is coming down the pike. We're going to make our products future-proof in that sense. And yeah, a lot has changed since then. I was a big convert to high-res recording. I did my first high-res recording of George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue in '97. And being able to play back at that high resolution and then compare it with the CD version. Well, Hyperion Knight, the pianist I was recording, said it best. We were playing back the high res in my listening room, and then I played in the CD, which I had very carefully mastered. And his face dropped, and he said, "Is something broken?" And yeah, so we were into high res early. Except then it all went sideways. That we got involved with SACD and DVD-A, and these are solid media. What is it? Packaged media, I think, is the buzzword. And the record companies were behind them. We certainly got behind them as a magazine, and reviewers and the high-end audio industry got behind these high-res formats, these high-res packaged media, and the whole thing failed because the most important link in that whole chain were the record retailers who didn't know what to do with them. They looked like CDs or they looked like DVDs, but they couldn't rack them with DVDs because they didn't have any video on them, and the SACDs looked like CDs, so where do they rack those? With the CDs, or do they create something special? And I remember in 2003 going to the then Virgin record store in Times Square looking for SACDs, and you couldn't find them. In the end I found them. They were in the basement at the back, sort of on a dusty shelf. So you have the first opportunity the public has of high-res media fizzled and failed. Still, obviously, it's still SACD still going in a sort of as a minority way. So the record I think the high-end industry, having put so much effort into SACD and DVD-A, sort of stepped back a bit and thought, well, we need to see where the future is going before we invest further in high-res media. And then I think the advent of the computer, which was a way of experiencing the benefits of high-res audio, crept up on everybody to some extent. I mean, you had people like Gordon at the forefront, but it crept up. We were all a bit sort of taken, not fully ready for it. We kind of knew it was coming, but not in a practical sense. So now, yes, in the last 3 years, now it is well established. And then the future, your question, which I'm finally getting around to answering, is that, which I take it to be, could it be that all this activity in hardware is a little bit of a sidewater, given that now everybody in the street has the equivalent of a Cray supercomputer in their pocket, which they use for everything in their life. Yeah, I mean, the high-end industry has audio, the hardware industry has to recognize that and make their products future-proof, that whatever source people want to use, whether it be their phone, whether it be their computer, whatever, they can handle it, that they have an input port on their product for that. Even if it's like, I mean, I'm a bit sniffy about Bluetooth audio because I think that the last thing I want with my music is to put it through yet another lossy codec. But maybe that will get better, maybe as bandwidth increases. So yeah, we have to be fully cognizant of everything that's happening and be open to it and devote the space to it. And again, maybe I'd have to tell you a story about retailing in hardware, that we were kind of really early onto the iPod as being a genuine source of audiophile music. With the advent, it was iTunes 4.5. I think I got it right. It's the first one where the iPod could play uncompressed files. First one where you could play files compressed with Apple lossless. Yes, it's Redbook standard, but now it is true CD quality. So we did a review of the second generation iPad in a 2005 issue of the magazine. And Michael Fremer, that time, he went in to visit a well-known audio retailer in New York City, whose name rhymes with Randy Binger. And Michael went into the store and was thrown out by the said gentleman. iPod has got nothing to do with high-end audio. You're betraying us. You're betraying the retailers on whom your magazine depends for its living. And Michael was saying, but, get out of here. And I think that attitude, thankfully, is now rarer than it used to be.
When I hear stories like that, it reminds me that there's a book called Zero, and it's about the history of the numerical value zero. Zero used to be illegal. It was a crime to believe in zero. You know, as it's a crime to believe in an iPod or something. You know, the world changes. The world isn't flat. It turns out it's round. We're not the center of the universe, et cetera, et cetera. Chris, I want to throw the same question right at you without having to make everybody suffer through me asking that same question again. So.
I forgot the question already.
It was really long.
You need me to ask
does
you
it
the
have
question.
to do with Neil Young selling Toblerones?
No, no.
Because that's what he had on Letterman, right?
Yeah. No. The question for you, as it was for John, is you being sort of the pope of computer audio with your website. What do you see in terms of new hardware? What do you see in terms of the validity of a phone or a tablet or maybe the watch is next? You know, there's the new term in the computer industry. It's called wearables. Where do you see all this fitting into your world, and where do you see it fitting into our world, and how do you see that connecting to the outside world?
Yeah. So like, I use my phone all the time for audio, and Bluetooth. I love it. The last thing I want to do when I go upstairs, see my daughter, and we have the Peachtree Deep Blue thing. The last thing I want to do is bust out a cable and connect it to the back of that thing. I just want to beam. Well, you know, I have the wireless cable, Bluetooth cable. So I just want to open up Mog or Spotify and play some music. So, you know, with Mog, the ability to download, I mean, how many 15 million albums, and I mean, that's like the greatest app ever, and all my readers are getting into it, and, you know, sure, it's not the height of living in terms of audio quality, but, you know, none of us has a DCS stack in our car, so, you know, you make concessions, so it's great, I think, for audiophiles, too, in that every Tuesday when new releases come out, you get to listen to them before you buy them, because you listen to it, you like it, then you go on Amazon and order it, or go on HT Tracks and download it. So all these new things, we may not use them the same way as Joe Sixpack uses it. Like, you know, that's his high-end system, the iPhone. For us, we use the same app, but that's kind of a music introduction thing for us, or vetting new releases and stuff like that. So same technology, we're just using it in a different way. And I think in terms of, you know, like computer hardware and stuff like that, I think as soon as internet pipes get big enough, everything's just going to come from the cloud, and I can't wait for it. Like, it's sure, to have 10 terabytes of music or whatever at home, it's, that's kind of the how many albums do you have type of thing now. And I would way much prefer every time I want to play something, it just streams from the cloud somewhere. I'll pay, Sony $10 a month to just access whatever I want in lossless quality. And, then you don't got to care about backing it up or anything like that. So I really hope we get there quick, but it takes a really, really big internet connection. I have 105 meg at home, and it's not fast enough to stream lossless CD quality. So maybe someday.
Well, let me continue this with you. So you look at an iPhone, and it can do 24/48, it can do 16:44, it can do CD quality. Let's just say we stick with just CD quality. As a device to play CD quality files back, do you see that as something that's as valid as the most cutting edge of laptops right now? Can you get good fidelity out of that?
You can get. I see it as totally as valid. Good fidelity is always, it's relative, right? I mean, in an airplane, good fidelity, going out to a headphone amp or something straight out of your iPhone, or if you can get the digital signal out into a Cypher Labs unit or something. I mean, it's awesome, and it's just anything that stores your content is just as valid. And, like last night at dinner, we're sitting there talking about new albums, and everyone's on their phone with Mog, starting to download new stuff, and it's awesome. And, like go into CanJam, and there's how many accessories for your iPhone to make it sound better. It's really, really cool,
Yeah, are we missing a market? Android. LG released a phone this summer that does 24/192. You can store 24-bit, 192 kilohertz files.
Yeah.
On an LG phone. So, where does that fall? Questions both to you and to John as reviewers, as magazine publishers. Where do these devices are cutting edge? Where do these devices fit in the conversation? And should they be part of your demo system when you're reviewing DACs?
Yeah. Well, I'll go first. The HTC One, it's got Beats audio in it, and it's got speakers that face forward, and that can do 24/192, and it sounds really, really good. I think most in the high end, most of it's going to be headphone listening from it, but it would be, in terms of missing a lot. People here in their rooms, it would be quite cool if they had a phone to do demos instead of Diana Krall DSD rips. It would be cool if somebody would just stream Mog from their iPhone without telling anybody, and people would go, "Wow, this does sound really good." So they're missing a huge market.
Yeah, I had something to say, and then when I heard about your connection speed, and I'm just sitting here depressed as hell because I have to deal with Verizon, who are still living in the last century when it comes to phone service. I dream of your slow speed. They keep telling us Fios is on the way, and we say when. It's on the way, but you have to understand it'll be some years in your neighborhood, because I live in a very old neighborhood, and it's really difficult to string optical fibers amongst outbuildings. Hate Verizon. Anyway, you did worry me. Something I've been thinking about a lot with the trend towards streaming from Mog and from Pandora and so on, and let alone the fact they're lossy codecs, and we're high in audio magazine and a bit sniffy about stuff like that. Isn't a whole part of being an audiophile is that you're a collector. You collect LPs, you then collect CDs, you now collect files, you back them up on your NAS, and we like stuff, and we're treating files like stuff. Streaming goes against all that, and I haven't come to terms with that, about the fact, well, let alone that, again, we come back to Verizon, and they want to charge me, and AT&T actually, want to charge me an arm and a leg for data downloads, and so if I'm streaming and I'm thinking, oh my God, if you feel the meter going on my monthly fee for data. So, but I haven't come to terms with the whole fact that streaming short circuits that whole audiophile collecting stuff syndrome. But
yeah, that's a good point. What about for your movies? Do you collect movies, or do you stream them? Or do you not watch movies?
I watch movies on television.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I use Apple TV. I don't have a disc spinner at home, so no Blu-rays, no DVDs, anything. It's all
Actually,
Apple TV
I
with
tell
Netflix.
you where I
and-
watch movies now is like flying out to a show like this. I buy some movies from iTunes in HD because they're really cheap, and I watch them on my iPad on the plane. That's actually an increasingly important part of my movie watching.
Hmm.
But again, it's stuff, not streaming.
Yeah, I get it. I haven't thought about that one before. Interesting.
So the next question I'm going to ask, it's sort of relevant to Matt Green and Gordon Rankin and Joe Harley. We're talking about all these new devices. We've been talking about computers, and now what defines a computer, and a phone and a tablet. These become computers, and the world is mobile. People are mobile. They have devices in their pocket now that can hold what we consider to be a legitimate file, 1,411 kilobytes and beyond. So Gordon, I'll start with you. You see, where do you see as the future of mobile devices and high-performance audio? What kind of products do you think high-end audio is going to be making that they're specifically designed for mobile devices, but they reach beyond just our audience here today? High-performance products that are elegant, sound spectacular, are affordable in price, and I know this sounds leading, but they're really designed for people who are on the go. They're designed for people who have tablets and phones and things like that. What do you see as the future?
I think for our audience,
Is Michael?
yeah, I think so. Says so.
You're live.
Battery. I think for our audience, I think we look at our devices two ways. When we're at home, we want everything. And when we're not, we will live with a certain diminished audio quality. I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years ago, John and I did jitter testing. We were just taking a look at the different iPods and stuff, and we threw the iPhone in there, and the GSM modulation was causing a significantly higher noise floor, and the quality of audio was significantly less than like a standard SSD or E² based iPod. I think we've learned to live with that, just like Bluetooth. And John, they're never going to get much better because they're going to try and do video now over Bluetooth. So, and I'm on the SIG, so if you want to know that stuff, I'm yelling at them daily. Just like Bluetooth, if you have a 44.1 file on your phone and you send it to a Bluetooth device, it's basically making it an MP3. Even the aptX, which is supposedly, the best quality, is actually one of the worst performing outputs ever. It takes the same amount of streaming data to do 44.1 Redbook material, and aptX is pretty much like maybe 720 quality. So I think that when we're looking at mobile devices, we have to look at in the two perspectives. When we are out and about, I think that the big thing is these companies are not going to want us to attach another device to it. The failure analysis with all the like MFI type products that attach through USB or through the 30 pin or the Lightning connector, or the new USB ports that are on some of the Android devices, they're already limiting these. The Samsung Galaxy came out and it was 2496 compatible, and some people could play 24192 files. The first update, they limited that to 2448.
Is that because of battery?
Yeah, and the other thing is they weren't actually looking at the enumeration of USB devices. They weren't seeing how much current they were drawing. So all of a sudden, you plug in this USB DAC that's, basically USB powered, and the battery life's going to hell. So these manufacturers are like, they're living on the specification for battery life. So all of a sudden now, if you plug in a device that says that it's capable of 2496 or 24192, they actually shut them off. They just totally, even if they're not even drawing any power, Samsung said, no, just turn them off completely. Don't even let them stream any audio data out of them at all. You know, and same way with Apple. Apple really doesn't want to see connected devices. You know, their mandate now is they want it to be wireless in some way. They're not really big into Bluetooth, but they'll live with that. But they want to see everything, you know, in some kind of AirPlay technology. So I think for high-end audio, we have to look at it as an app-based program. You could do, in that way, we can actually skirt these limitations. Like, AirPlay is only really good to 1648, okay? So if you look at that, you say, oh, well, that's not high res. But we can write applications that can go further than that. There's, you know, a couple FLAC player and things like that that'll let you stream. And there's some, you know, DLNA client capabilities that allow streaming of high res music. But, you know, we are also limited to how much stuff we can put on these phones. You know, you have 128 gigabyte area. You start loading that up, and what do you do? And most of these, you know, the Apple products don't come with SD cards. I don't know how many of the Android devices do, but, you know, that would be a place to put them. But it's going to take up a lot of room. So I think you'll see in the high-end area apps for all the iOS devices and Android devices that act as more media player and media redirectors, and they'll integrate with, you know, some hardware product that you can actually bring into, you know, these high-res files without actually bringing them into your phone or your mobile device.
What about, you talked a lot about Bluetooth, but there's also Wi-Fi. You know, AirPlay goes over Wi-Fi, DLNA goes over Wi-Fi. How is that going to play into high-performance audio and mobile devices, or even high-performance audio and desktop computers or laptops?
I think Wi-Fi is probably going to get bigger and bigger. People don't want to go through their house and route Ethernet cables. It's just so much easier to say, is this Wi-Fi compliant, and just stick it wherever they want it. There's no wires involved and everything.
I work for a wire company, by the way.
I guess in some aspects, I guess I do too, right?
I had just a
fired.
quick sidebar. When I was looking up Bluetooth specs, because I couldn't believe how badly the first Bluetooth device I measured was. So I was looking up the specs, and there is a way to get more bandwidth out of Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Uses an auxiliary Wi-Fi channel. So why not use Wi-Fi from the start?
So I want to kind of direct the same question at Matt Green. Now, Matt, you work for Logitech, which is a multi-billion-dollar company, publicly traded company, huge, and your focus is ultimate ears headphones, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when you're designing headphones, you know, everybody in here is looking for the Nate Plus Ultra. Anybody here who's a headphone enthusiast is looking for the Nate Plus Ultra in terms of headphone performance. But you're a big enterprise. You're building products for a very broad audience, much broader than the high-end audio enthusiast community. So when you're voicing these headphones, how do you do this balancing act? You've got to make headphones that sound really good with low-resolution files, but it has to be compelling enough so that the rest of us here want to buy the headphone as well. How do you do that dance?
Yes. Well, we have different product lines. We brand some things as Logitech. We brand some things as Ultimate Ears. And we have a brand that we launched a little over a year ago called Logitech UE. And so sometimes those categorize the type of sound quality and the target audience for the product. Yesterday there was an interesting discussion on, you know, what is the right sound for a headphone. And I think a lot of the research is coming back saying, boy, we don't know, but we're getting close, and we're seeing the types of things that need to get brought into the equation to figure that out. There is a strong contention still that you get as close to what a great measuring pair of loudspeakers would sound like in a well-treated room. And obviously on a lower cost product, you can't use the same quality of driver or maybe some of the same materials, but the target to strive for that type of performance is still the same. We still want to deliver high fidelity, as flat or correct of a frequency response as possible, with as low of distortion as possible at that price point.
And to follow up, not related to headphones, you know, how does a company like Logitech, how do they look at the conversation we're having here? What is their response to, say, seeing Neil Young on Letterman talking about high resolution audio, and the more verifiable than not rumor that iTunes is going to release 24, 48 files? What does Logitech think of that, and how does Logitech start to develop products that are going to be able to take advantage of all this? But before you answer, you guys had one of the most elegant, one of the most beautiful solutions our industry's ever seen. If anybody's ever used, has anybody ever used a Squeezebox in here? It was a lot of us. It was as elegant and easy to use as Sonos is, but it actually sounded phenomenal.
Why'd you kill it?
We're not there yet. You're not allowed to ask my questions.
Yeah, he was the responsible one.
Before we all come at you with pitchforks. How do people sort of in the Skunk Works division of Logitech, how do they keep abreast of the conversations and where things may be going? And how do you guys get ahead of it and develop products so that you can have relevant products for these new formats as they appear?
Okay, let me address Squeezebox first. It's not dead. So with the introduction of the Logitech UE brand, we introduced 7 products. One of them is called the UE Smart Radio, and it's very similar in form to the Squeezebox radio. It preserves a lot of the same streaming capabilities. Now there are some technical differences. One of the aims for the Smart Radio was to be a little more user-friendly from the setup perspective, not requiring an account necessarily with Squeezebox to start up and start listening to streamed music. Also, we took advantage of the platforms that are growing so much in Android and iOS to allow people to integrate with their phones or control the device through their phones. It will still stream audio from a computer, Mac or PC, no longer a NAS drive, but as long as the computer's up and running, then it offers a home streaming solution still. And in a desire to reach out to those who've built something around Squeezebox, you can actually take the Smart Radio and update its firmware or cross-grade its firmware over to the Squeezebox system so that it's still compatible with maybe older Squeezebox devices. And so the market told us that the device we needed to make needed to be a little more portable and fit a little more with mobile devices, and so that's what we built with Smart Radio, also including a battery so that it could be moved around. And that's what we decided to build in that case. On a broader sense of how do we take advantage of what's growing, we do recognize that today the majority of people are still listening to phones with highly compressed files, and we want to inspire them in awareness, and that's been brought up before, that there's these wonderful experiences to be had with your music if you can enjoy it a little more richly. I worked on the UE 900, which is our flagship in-ears product for retail, and it's wonderful to me the number of people who listen to that for the first time and use it and come back to me and say, hey, I can do it now. I listen to CDs, and then I listen to Pandora and MP3s. I can hear the difference, and they never figured, that they were of that clout of music listener before. But we bring that detail out in our higher end earphones. Another example of catering to the masses and the easy streaming is our Bluetooth speakers. We developed the UE Boom, which released this spring, and I've had a great experience here talking to people about it, which I wasn't sure a lot of people in this community would be talking about it. But as I sat at our Ultimate Ears Customs booth yesterday, there were several people just saying, wow, I love the Boom for what it is. And as Chris mentioned, it's not their primary system at home, but it's the one they take to the hot tub. It's the one that they throw on the motorcycle. It broke my heart the day that marketing came and said acoustics isn't everything. The sound isn't going to be everything on this product. It has to do a lot of other things to attract people. But we went through and put this acoustical skin on it that's attractive and acoustically transparent, but it also repels water, so people can take it places they wouldn't otherwise. And we've done a lot to make sure it's the speaker you can take anywhere, do anything with, but at the same time it turns heads because of how loud it can be for its size, for how well balanced it is for the type of product it is, for how much bass it does produce out of 1.5-inch drivers. And that's our thinking going forward, so that as people catch the wave of better quality audio files and other, a better phone that will stream a better quality audio file, we're already making products that they love to take everywhere and that are performing acoustically wonderfully, so that they'll hear the difference.
Okay, so I know you work for a publicly traded company, and some things are private, and you can't. They'll have you flown to Switzerland, and we'll never see you again. What about Wi-Fi? What about, as we talk, there's higher resolution file formats that are coming. How does a big enterprise like Logitech, how are you going to adapt to that if and when that starts to become successful? People who are buying 24, 48 files from iTunes, if and when that happens, or Pono files or HD tracks, they're not going to want to send that through Bluetooth.
We do have kind of a transition device when we started to move more from docks into wireless. We have an AirPlay speaker currently, and so it's not off the radar for us.
Thanks. So I'm going to, before I get to Matt, I've got some interesting questions for Matt, and they'll kind of tie to Gordon. I wanted to circle back and ask Joe Harley another question. There was a number of times, on a number of occasions in conversation, we heard things like Mog or Spotify brought up. Now you work for a cable company, but you also work in the music industry. You're an engineer, producer. There was a number of years where you didn't even work at AudioQuest. You were so busy, you left AudioQuest, and you made a very good living in the music industry. And then you came back to AudioQuest. How is Mog and Spotify and Pandora and all of these streaming services, how are they affecting the music industry? How do they affect the record labels, the musicians, the producers, the engineers? How do they affect it? How do things like that, the streaming, affect that?
Well, the whole model, is this on? Okay. The whole model changed, and in some ways it was awkward. In some ways I think it was a good and necessary thing. It's a lot harder to get budgets for new recordings these days. It used to be I was doing a dozen records a year and getting budgets to do them. And then as the ongoing disappearance of physical stores, brick and mortar stores to buy this stuff, as that began to shut down, budgets began to be tougher. However, people adapt, they start to do more home recording, artists figure out other ways to promote, and they're using things like Spotify or whatever they need to do, and other ways to promote themselves. And labels have had to adapt too. Now labels have shrunk a lot. It's interesting to deal with EMI for a number of years and watch, the number of people you're dealing with get smaller and smaller and smaller and younger. And you talk to people that Miles Davis, he's one of those jazz guys, right? And they're at a label. No, I mean, it's a little scary sometimes, but they have to adapt too, and they're a little slow to it, but they are adapting. So you're seeing now that they're all scrambling to do the back catalog in high res, and for the most part, I think a lot of that work is done, or on its way to being done. So they adapt.
So when you record, or when somebody else, let's say you're living on the edge of. You're recording a lot of the music that we...
I do like to live on the edge.
You do live on the edge. And I was going to ask you, Matt Green says he takes his boom to the hot tub. I was going to ask you, what do you take to the hot tub?
I can't go into that. Generally you, but yeah.
No, but seriously. What... You obviously are going to archive. You're going to archive music at a high resolution because that's more the world you live in. And it's close to your heart. What does a mainstream band like Maroon 5 do? What are the mainstream bands doing, and how do they archive their music? Are they just recording at 1644, or are they putting stuff in 24-bit?
I mean, you mentioned Maroon 5. I know some of those guys, so it's funny. Especially mentioning those two. They a couple of those guys come to my house, and all they want to do is play records. And I mean, all they want to do. And what do they want to play? They want to play Ella Fitzgerald. They want to play classical. They want to play Miles. They want to play Coltrane. We rarely pull out contemporary pop music, and it's not because of me. I have it, but that's what they want to hear. But that's besides the point. What I think you're getting at is there is an absolute awareness of sound quality that I don't think they really talked about much 5 years ago, but they do now. I won't mention the member, but I think you know who I'm talking about, who was really pleased. He came to one of our Blue Note mastering sessions and was so proud that he'd released his new solo record. And he bought the LP and gave it to us all. And we're like, wow, this is so cool. That's great. You did it on vinyl. When's it really coming out? And he said, no, man, this is it. And I said, I think we need to go for a long walk. He actually was not going to put it out in digital at all. And I said, I love your enthusiasm, but you do need to stay in business. But anyway, to answer your question, I do think there's more awareness than ever before with these guys.
Do you see Spotify and Mog and Pandora? Is that going to stick around, or is there going to be a point where the labels draw a line in the sand and say, you know what, this is, we're getting pulled over the coals here, and we don't want to do this anymore? Or is it a Pandora's box? Once it's out of the box, there's no putting it back in.
I'm the wrong guy to ask. I don't know how they view that.
That's a fair answer. That's a great answer. So I want to kind of move over more to the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of hardware and applications and things like that. Who here uses iTunes? Who here uses JRiver? Who uses FooBar? Who uses one of anything I just mentioned? Okay, so basically everybody in here is using computer audio. And who thinks iTunes is easy to use, elegant? Only a few people?
Yeah.
Other people think it's hard? Okay. How about JRiver? Is JRiver an elegant solution? Easy to use? That's great. FooBar? Easy, elegant, just a few people? Matt, you're in a really interesting position because iTunes really it forged or broke a lot of trail in terms of the consciousness of what people can do with a computer, using the computer as an interface, using the application to manage and curate their music, and then later on to manage and curate movies and things like that. But it does have limitations. And their limitations are somewhat tied to the relationships they have with the content providers. Right? You live in a world where you're almost beholden to no one. And so you can build an application where you can play any music file and format. You can play virtually any video file and format. I think your program also can be used as a set-top recorder box. It does locally connected devices like a USB DAC, Toslink, HDMI.
This is a great question, by the way.
It's-
I just keep going. This is really good
I'm
stuff.
getting.
This is an advertising plug, right?
Wait, don't buy yet. Don't buy yet.
Oh no.
I'm getting to a question.
I want one on my iPhone.
So I lost my train of thought. So you can do all these locally connected devices, and interestingly, you can also do networked devices. You offer a DLNA option where the computer either wired or wireless, but I prefer wire. You can connect to a near infinite number of devices and send different songs and different movies to different locations. Really, the only limitation is bandwidth. So the question I have for you is, how do you decide to add all of these features, and at the same time, how do you figure out how to map that so that it's intuitive and it's elegant and people can use it?
Well, the truth is, it's a challenge. I mean, and that's why iTunes may not have the things that some of the people here want. Why doesn't it play a FLAC file, an APE file? Why can't it switch sample rates of your sound card? There's these really simple things it can't do. It's not that Apple can't afford to do it. It's that for them the priority is it has to be simple. And they've done really well with that answer. So, who are we to criticize it? So for us though, we say, well, gee, customers want that. That helps people. We can enjoy our music more if we'll do these things. So we do it. But the cost of that is there's some complexity. And we hear that all the time. I wish it was easier. I wish it was easier. And so do I. I wish it was easier too. There's all these things people want to do. And I guess that's the challenge. That's what gets us up in the morning is let's see if we can make it do these neat things that people want. And there's just listen to all the things these guys have listed that computer audio can do. You know, it's a long list of really neat stuff, and there's just a lot of work to do, a lot of opportunities there.
In this question, I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to ask Gordon the same question, and I'm probably going to ask Chris Connaker the same question. So we'll get 3 different perspectives on this. You know, we all got. Who has a USB DAC here? Everybody. Who has a DLNA device? Who's got a DAC on the network? 2.5 people. One was just born. Now we're up to 3. Okay, so clearly a locally connected device. It's been easy for people to do. People are attracted to it. It's working. Conversely, has anybody here heard of DLNA? DLNA. Okay, so a decent amount of people have heard of DLNA. Has anybody here heard of USB? So it's kind of a weird. This is a weird conundrum. DLNA, by the way, there's about 20 billion DLNA devices on the planet today, and nobody knows how to use them. What is it going to take? I'm going to ask you first, Matt. What is it going to take for something that has so much rich potential? What is it going to take for something like that to become adopted by our tribe here, but also be intuitive and easy enough for my mother and normal people outside of? We like it hard. If it's easy to use, it's not audiophile. Yeah, there's got to be a little bit of pain, or it's just not worth it. But seriously, what's it going to take? What is going to be the catalyst that pushes something like DLNA to a point where it becomes very matter of fact and easy to use, or do you think it'd be superseded by something else? Because the network has so much potential. And before you answer the question, there was something else I read. I'm sorry. There's something else I read just the other day. There was a forecast for how much money was going to be spent on IT for 2014. And it was over $2 trillion worldwide will be spent on networking devices, both in the home and in the enterprise. So there seems to be, infrastructurally, there seems to be this great potential. So again, to circle back, what's it going to take to get something like DLNA to be a mainstream, easy to use, and adopted?
Well, you said yourself it's on 20 billion devices.
But
And if that's true, I would say it's awfully successful.
But it's not being used.
The thing is, people don't know they have it. You know, you bought a TV and it's kind of a checkbox, and it's kind of a chicken and egg problem because the manufacturers view adding things like DLNA as, well, we just have to do it. Somebody else is doing it. We better do it. It's a checkbox on the feature set, so they hire some guy in India to write it for $200, and it doesn't really work that well, and they slap it on there. And for us, that's been a challenge because there's these manufacturers that put it out. They say we're DLNA certified, but the DLNA certification is more about writing a check every year than it is about really making sure it's a good device. So how do you fix that? I mean, one model is Apple's solution, which is we're just going to build a closed circle, and it's our device, and it's our software, and it works. And I would guess Sonos is sort of the same way. But I think that's kind of pessimistic. I think there are some really great DLNA devices. You can get them today. Maybe you have to look for them a little bit, but there's great software to use it, and there's great devices, and it lets you do some neat things. You can push your video around the house. You can push your audio. And you're focusing on DLNA, but it's not just that. There's so many neat ways to move your music around right now. And
Give us some examples.
So I'm kind of a propeller head. So for fun, I took an old tablet, an Android tablet I wasn't using, and I mounted it to the wall in my bathroom. So I can walk in and I push a button, and it plays through Wi-Fi, and it's hooked up to an amp and speakers, and it's just one touch, and you've got music in your bathroom coming from a NAS. A computer powers it. But it's like this really pretty touchscreen interface, and didn't cost very much. Wi-Fi powers the audio, and it's all your library right there. Can do video too if you would want that in your bathroom. But it just so DLNA. There's that. There's a long list of ways to move media around, and it makes it an exciting time to be in computer audio. It's an exciting time to be an audiophile.
My crystal ball says there's napalm coming. Gordon, what do you think?
My problem with DLNA is just what Matt said. You've got 5 engineers doing it the wrong way, and when you have 3 different portions of DLNA, just so everybody knows, when you have DLNA, you have a renderer, which is usually like the DAC, okay, and then you have the control point, which is like your remote control app that tells what we call the server where to send the files and what type of files it can play, et cetera, et cetera. Whenever you have 3 different pieces of software trying to tie itself together in a specification that's pretty, let's say, not tied very closely, then you have all kinds of problems. And I think that's been the biggest problem with DLNA so far, is the fact that all 3 pieces don't usually work together as well as they should be. You know, a good example is, you know, I've, and Kelly, hold yours. I've got everything at home and at the office, you know, because you have to look at where the technology is going. You know, so, you know, I have DLNA devices from 4 or 5 different companies. I have, I think, 20 NAS drives, something like that, with music on it, and all of those are servers. So you take a control app and you route music from one of the NAS drives to one of the DLNA capable renderers, and all of a sudden the server will start sending file formats that the renderer says it doesn't support. And what happens? It's awful noise, or it doesn't work at all, or one of them just stops working. You know, and that, I think that now that they've got an organization in place that looks like they're moving things forward, is that what you think? Specification-wise, they're trying to tighten the specification.
Well, Gordon, let me just ask a side question to that, because many people may not be aware of this, but next year, June 2014, the FCC is more or less mandating that the cable providers, our cable providers, have to give us a TCP/IP-based television set-top box. So we're going to have a set-top box in our house that connects over IP.
Right.
It'll be a host device, and then for additional TVs in the house, instead of having another complex box, we won't have a host, we'll have small clients
Right.
that loop back to that.
Yeah.
Now, the only language or the only protocol that's been approved, it's not to say that there won't be others approved, but the only approved protocol for communication at this point is DLNA. Does that put pressure on the DLNA group then to have greater continuity, because this is going to become a broader reached platform by force?
I think one of the problems is, you know, DLNA organization is going to have to actually test these things. You know, it's kind of a self-tested environment right now. You know, and so you have this engineer in India that just made $200. You know, he's got his home brew set up in his bathroom with a tablet. You know, and he says, "Oh, I'm able to communicate with it. This is now DLNA compliant." That is going to be the big problem. If they actually have, you know, like, to get AirPlay certification, you have to go to one of the Apple-approved test places and get it certified and stamped with their approval. That's what we really need for DLNA devices to actually move forward. They need to have test centers that have, you know, all this wild stuff and try it with that and make it work. And if it all works, then they pass, and then it gets the actual stamp of approval. And you know, it's not like they pay, what, is it $10,000 or
It's about 10 grand a year.
10 grand to actually put a DLNA sticker on your product. Yeah. So.
Chris, I want to throw that question at you, and then I have a follow-up question on the same topic for John Atkinson.
Okay. Yeah. The main thing too. Yeah. It's got to work, and that is, you know, the part that sucks. But I think for it to really take off, assuming they get it to work, is I'll use Steve's mom as my guinea pig, because he does as well. Like, your mom, it's got to DLNA.
Your mom.
There's got to be good apps for mobile, because if you're going to stream something, for most people, it's coming from mobile. So your mom's got to be able to open up iTunes or YouTube and stream it DLNA. So right now, doing that, sure, there are apps that can do it, but it's kind of kludge. I mean, iTunes doesn't support it now. Doing it from YouTube, you can use like the Chromecast, but to do it to any DLNA device, I think for it to take off, it's got to come from a mobile device, and it's got to work from any app people are using.
Well, that brings up a follow-up question for Matt and Gordon before I get to you, John. If you look at the DLNA conventions, if you look at the different products, the only file format that a phone or a mobile device has to be compatible with is MP3. It can support any number of file formats beyond that, but to be DLNA certified as a mobile device, it has to support MP3. Now the problem is a home device, the traditional 17-inch box, the only file format it needs to support is linear PCM. It can have MP3, that's an option, but it doesn't have to have that.
I think it still has to have MP3.
You know, I double-checked that, and I went to the DLNA org site, and it didn't. And so the point of this question is there seems to be this incompatibility between platforms. One device has to support one format. Another device has to support another format. How do we bridge this?
I think in the new format, it does say that you have to do at least MP3, and then you can add on anything after that, linear PCM or WAV files or whatever you want to do. But I think each one has to support MP3 as a minimum.
Okay, so then they're moving forward.
Yeah.
They're moving forward. Matt, how do you deal with the complexity? How do you deal with the complexity of all these different file formats and all these different devices and the limitations of different devices? How do you bridge the gap so that all the devices can speak to one another?
Which Matt?
Matt Ashland.
How do we? Well, a team of people that really care and work hard, is kind of the answer. And we just try to get everything we can through the office and onto the bench and test it, because you learn a little something with each one. You talk to customers. I hope I've talked to a few of you guys on our forum, and when there's a problem, we try to work through it. And it's just brick by brick, and you keep doing it, and you hope, and I think it is. It's gotten a lot better in the last few years, and we keep going. That's where it leads.
John, as a sort of a longer living benchmark gold standard stereophile, not you young buck.
Yeah.
No, the magazine.
Yeah.
Magazine. Where do you see streaming devices fitting into the magazine and into the conversation? Are they becoming more and more? You just had the Marantz on your cover this month.
I mean, we decided some years ago that we would actually create a new vehicle for coverage of this area, which was audiostream.com. Chris and I were on a panel three years ago at this show, and what came out of, we were then talking about using a computer in the same way you'd use a CD transporter or a DVD player as a source. In other words, how do you make that an appliance so that people can just use it? And I think in the years since, that problem has been solved. If you're just going to use your computer with its drive to feed audio to your system, you use Audiphana or Amara or JRiver or Decibel or Pure Music, and all the housekeeping with iTunes is taken care of, and it's become easy. You don't have to worry about anything to play music in its native resolution over your system. With talking about streaming and DLNA servers and so on, moving files around the home, and this is all a whole new world, and I'm not really up to speed on it. I know how to do it, but I sort of think when I see the letters U, P, and P, and I think U must stand for useless or unlovely or something like that. So I mean, as a magazine, we go into it and we expand with AudioStream. It's obviously a legitimate way of playing high-res music in high-end audio sound quality. But it's not at that stage where your mother can get used to it. It's not at the stage where it's an appliance. It sucks. And it will get better, right, guys? You guys will make it better.
That'd be a great tagline on somebody's next ad for their DLNA streamer. It sucks. John Atkinson, October 2014.
I mean, what I want as an audiophile is no matter what files I have, whatever I play them over, recognizes them, says, oh yes, that's a FLAC or it's whatever, and plays the music. And doesn't let me get involved with any of that. Well, I have to set the media player to do this, and I don't want to be involved in that. I just want to get to the music. In the same way that with package media, it was easy. You put a disc in the tray and you press close and play, and the music came out, and it was wonderful. And that was even more wonderful than LPs, because LPs you're always worrying about, is your stylus dirty, and have I set the VTA right for this new thick 180 gram LP? And I mean, it's very nerve-wracking, and I leave all that to Mikey Fremer. No, but I want it to be an appliance as much as possible. I don't want to get in the nuts and bolts of renderers and clients and hosts. And
John, can I just say I found the perfect solution to DLNA in my house?
Yeah.
I just get in the living room, I just turn it up.
Or-
And
or-
it works every time,
or-
seamlessly.
or-
I can even do it with LPs.
Or
It's
you
great.
sneak in it when my wife wants to listen to something I'm listening to. I take the disc out of the drive and I walk over to her office and I give it to her.
So modern. Matt Green, why don't you tell us what you think about this topic and what Logitech's stand is on things like UPnP and DLNA, and then we're going to move on to one super controversial topic after that,
Well,
not cables.
I don't know that we necessarily have specific stands on things. I mean, our goal is to help people enjoy music as many places and as much of the time as possible. We do have quite extensive PQA teams constantly going around to make sure that our products will talk nice with every type of source we may come up with, and that's probably about it.
Good enough. Good enough. So about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I read this really interesting article. It was a former Microsoft engineer turned senior vice president turned cashed out, and in his interview, he was talking about how radical advancements have been in terms of hardware, processors, hard drives, semiconductors. Everything has moved at this extremely radical pace. But his contention was that software, operating systems, and haven't kept up the pace of that, and therefore his argument is the next innovation that's going to come for consumers isn't going to be in hardware, but it's going to come in operating systems and applications. Gordon, you live in both worlds. You designed hardware, you've worked in applications and operating systems, and Matt, you're an applications guru. Do you think this guy's on the mark, or do you think that he just happens to be a Microsoft guy and sees the world through his perspective?
I totally agree with this. I think that what we'll see in next year is hardware will pretty much stand still. You'll see the capability of firmware upgrades and things like that to match the software needs that are coming out. But I think software is probably 3 to 4 years behind where the hardware is right now. And that's all really good for us because, upgrades for software is a significantly less costly item than redoing your whole DAC network system. So I think that's a really good thing for the user standpoint that we move into that. And I think it's going to get to the point where, you might have NAS drives and USB drives and Thunderbolt drives where, Matt could write an application that would see all that as like a pool of capable files that John can play or Laura can play anywhere they want in their house.
Could you see a world where there's one dominant or a predominant operating system, and that operating system plugs into any device? It could be on the phone, it could be on a tablet, it could be on a computer, it could be on the NAS, and everything has this consistency and continuity to it.
I really doubt that. And that's just basically because of the way the world works. That certain people think that they're right all the time, and other people think they're right about everything. Nobody's ever going to agree with everything. And the large players, Samsung, Apple, Western Digital, Seagate, all these guys, they all have a certain amount of intellectual property that they've invested heavily in, and they don't want to have to go ahead and say, oh, okay, so-and-so companies made this perfect world operating system, and we're going to trash everything that we've done for the last 20 years. Move everything to that. I really don't see that happening.
To this question, I think each side kind of blames the other one. The software guys go, "Oh, I wish there was better hardware," and the hardware guys go, "Oh, the software should be better." So, I don't know if you can generalize so much. I will take your bet that I think hardware will just keep getting better and better and better, and we'll continue to be amazed by the things it can do. And I hope software does too. And about OSs, it's more chaotic today than I feel sorry for myself because it was really nice, when it was like 97% of the world is going to use a Windows desktop PC, and that's what defined computing. And it's very chaotic today. What is a computer? It's everything. Everything around our refrigerators are computers, and our toasters, and Android's everywhere, and iOS is everywhere, and Firefox has an OS, and there's BlackBerry, and there's just so many choices, and it's like I say, sometimes I feel sorry for myself because it's hard for us to go, well, where is it going to be? But it also means there's a lot of excitement and there's innovation, and it makes it kind of a fun time to be around.
But how do you deal, Matt, with the fact that even if you stick with a single company like Apple, the next generation of their OS won't be able to do things perhaps that you rely on for your product?
We curse at them and then suck it up and deal with
Do
it.
they take we eliminated that. We completely eliminated that API, and your whole consistency
I mean,
of the company may
at
depend
least
on
both
that.
sides do it. Apple does that, and Microsoft's Windows 8 isn't making a lot of friends
Well,
either.
I haven't gone near Windows since Vista.
Yeah, the operating systems, from a programming standpoint, I mean, there's always something. Each time that they come out with a new operating system, people like us just swear for weeks and weeks and weeks. I think it took when Microsoft released Windows 8, I think they had 1,300 critical errors for the first 6 weeks or something like that they were trying to resolve before they even got to the point where the USB stuff was fixed. So it took really 6 months for even Microsoft at full tilt to fix everything that they'd done on the release. So I can imagine that you guys would probably like, we support Windows 7 and below.
Well, listen, we're not completely done here, but I want to thank the panel. You guys are all each individually pretty interesting people, amazing people in our industry, and you've got good perspectives. I'd like to open up the panel to the audience, and if people have questions, we'd like to maybe take the next 10 minutes to take some questions. So, young man in the back.
I have a question about more about the recordings that are going on with the dynamic production that's happening with all the MP3s. It seems to proliferate everything we buy. So even if you have good equipment, it's hard to get good sound because of the way it's mixed or mastered. I mean, what do you guys think how do you think that's going to play out?
I have a little bit of an answer for that. There's a thing called R128, which is a standard pushed over in Europe for broadcast so that commercials wouldn't be so darn loud. And something Jay Rivers done, and I hope every media player does it, is allow you to analyze the volume of your music and make it so when they try to make a song sound louder, when you play it, it doesn't sound louder, it just sounds worse. And if everyone would do that, it would end the loudness war.
Yeah, loudness normalization, so that, as Matt said, the mastering engineer at the request of the record company squashes the dynamics to hell because it'll sound louder. Well, under R128, and iTunes now does it, that false loudness will be defeated by the fact that it'll reduce the loudness to the tracks either side of it. And now all you're aware of is that the peaks are gone and the dynamic expression is gone. And so it reduces the incentive for the record company suits to destroy the music, chasing a false goal, which is loudness. Now, what's interesting is there are musicians now who themselves are becoming aware of this. I mean, Joe said, for a long time musicians weren't paying any notice to sound quality. Interviewing a recent Guitar Player magazine where the guitarist of Rush saying they're remastering an album. This album they did after the drummer's daughter died or wife died, which was a very personal statement to them, but they hated the sound of it, and they never listened to it anyway because it had a lot of personal, emotional things going on with it. But now they've remastered it, and they've said, it didn't have to sound that bad. It could have some light and shade. So we've redone it, and there's a 9 Inch Nails venue release is done in 2 versions, one with light and shade and one without any at all, or one without any at all and one with just a hint of light and shade. So the artists themselves are becoming aware of this, and the artists are applying pressure to the record companies. Stop screwing up my music. And yeah, I'm on a panel next week at the AS in New York on this very subject, and how the progress has been made since our 128 was introduced, and the loudest wars are over if you want it.
Next question.
Yeah, John, you and I traded a couple emails this past summer. This is a little bit different, but I think it'll be interesting to this crowd, about the Apple devices, while they take 24, 48 files, they actually were truncating the 24 bits to 16 bits in playback.
Yeah.
Could you maybe talk just a little bit about that? Because it does bear on the iTunes going to 24, 48.
Yeah, I mean, the gentleman and I were corresponding about the fact that, you know, iPhones, latest generation iPods will handle 24-bit data. So I thought, well, I just check that. So I encoded some test tones with Apple lossless and loaded the AIF files, 24-bit files onto my phone, which is a 3GS, so it's an antique. And I found to my astonishment that actually, no, only 16-bit data were coming out. That you feed in both Apple lossless and AIFF and Wave, 1 kilohertz, divided 1 kilohertz at minus 90 would come out with a characteristic pattern of odd order harmonics that you get when you truncate 24 to 16. So I thought, that's odd. Maybe there's something wrong. So I tried my iPad, that did the same. And then we corresponded, and so I'm puzzled by this. Because obviously Apple iTunes will deal correctly with 24-bit data. But the portable devices don't appear to, at least the ones I have tried.
Well, you can actually, what will actually happen is some of the new apps that come out, some of the new,
is instead of using iTunes to bring your music in, you can actually go into iTunes and use what's called the folder interface. So different applications actually have a way of bringing files into their own folder. So what you'll see in the future is new apps other than iTunes that'll be able to be playback, because all these phones and everything, they can pretty much do 24/192.
Yeah,
They're all
the
capable.
chipset is 24-bit.
The chipsets are all there to do this. It's all in iTunes itself that they limited to 1648.
But why? Because Apple themselves, I mean, at last year's AES convention, the big thing was mastered for iTunes, and
Right.
Apple are now inviting 24-bit masters to be ready for the implied launch of high-res files through iTunes. And iTunes itself on mobile devices is saying, 16-bit, that's it. Why?
I don't work for them.
But you know the people there, don't they talk?
Yeah, I know that. You know the funny, when you deal with any big company, it's like you ask these questions and then you get there's nothing in a response. You know, because it's a large company. They're only allowed to talk about stuff that is released to the real world. Yeah, about 10 years ago, it was different. You know, you'd ask a question and the guy would go, "I'll call you back in a little bit," and they'd actually go out to the parking lot with their personal cell phone and give you a call and tell you what it is. But that's pretty much squashed, I think. You know, that doesn't happen. So I think what Apple will probably do is when they release 24-bit, that's when iTunes will be 24-bit.
And there'll be iOS 8.
Yeah.
We'll have to upgrade again.
Well, it is free to do that, you know. So
I haven't upgraded yet. I've let my wife do it, and I'm waiting to see how she gets on with it.
Yeah, I think it'll just be an easy download, firmware update, whatever. It's kind of much ado about nothing now.
Well, except now if you have 24-bit files and you play them on your iPhone, you're only getting 16-bit resolution.
It's iPhone.
Well,
Playing with Plug Player.
But then when you use a third-party app on your phone now, you're taken away from being an appliance, and Steve's mum won't be able to use it anymore.
My mom can use Plug Player. But it took about 6 hours. She didn't like it. It took me 6 hours to show her how to do it. Any more questions? No more questions? Oh, thank you.
I want to thank Matt Ashland for soon to be releasing JRiver on Linux. I only use Windows for JRiver. And I wonder if their support of Linux, because I've used Linux for the last 6 to 8 years, I've seen it kind of go a little downhill. And as far as home computing, Ubuntu, things like that. And I'm wondering if they're going to continue to support Linux because of the Android, or and they'll continue to support, or should I worry? But that's just another operating
Well,
system.
never worry. It doesn't change anything. So
That may be the
No,
quote.
but-
That might be the quote of the whole seminar.
no, but you're welcome. And it'll be, we push it up and it falls down for the first few months because it's tough to take. It's like 2 million lines of code and get it on another platform and everything working. But we're committed to doing it.
To commiserate with you, I should have said this before. in the beginning as a full disclosure. Joe and I work for Joe Harley at AudioQuest. He's my boss. So I buy all the stuff Gordon buys too, and then I have to sneak it through my expense report. We all have Mac computers at AudioQuest, the entire global sales team. They're a very nice product. It's elegant. But every single one of us, about 20 odd people, we also all have Windows 7 on our computers only to run JRiver. It's the only reason we put Windows 7 on there, because there's the JRiver on the Windows side has more functioning features than on the Apple side. So I feel your pain, brother.
Yeah.
I feel your pain.
Well, props to Chris Connaker, because on that same panel we were on 3 years ago, and we were talking about, I was expecting to say questions were, should we use a Mac? How do you use a Windows computer? And Chris said, use Linux. And yeah, and the one gentleman here listened to you.
So if anybody else has any questions.
Those calls, I'll just redirect those to your home phone. Is that okay?
Could you go ahead and elaborate on the R128 and replay gain and how that's being implemented in either the software and or the hardware, especially mobile devices?
Well, I can answer the software side. It's a pretty, I wouldn't say it's simple. It's simple for the end user, because all you do is you just take your files and you analyze them. And any type of file, and even video files, you can analyze. And out the other side, I'll say there's a few things that are kind of neat. The one that you're asking about is the R128 volume. And all that means is this song sounds really loud or it doesn't sound loud. And then when you play it, it's a single checkbox to turn on volume leveling, and then you target, they call it 0 dB FS. They use this, for some reason they decided to use loudness units instead of decibels. So there's a bunch of lingo, but it doesn't really matter. You turn it on and everything will sound the same volume. A couple other measures come out that people here would probably find interesting, which is measures of dynamic range. The R128 defines a way to do dynamic range, and again, it's in LUs, which are really just another word for decibels. Bigger number means more dynamic range. So you can if you have 3 masters of something ripped, you can take a look at how was it done. And you can even use that information to guide how you purchase music, buy things that are mastered well. And a second measure is DR, which was sort of popularized before R128, and it's just another number. It's like 7 or 15. And just another number you can look at that tells you how much range, how your music's mastered.
Yeah.
I got a follow-up to that. I kind of want to ask Matt, because aren't we just in the same spot as we were with just lower volume? So everyone's sure they wanted loud volume, but they really want normalization, because you can't have high dynamic range and listen to the headphones on the subway. You're never going to hear the low passages or whatever. So now, instead of, it's super loud, it's not as loud, but you still have no dynamic range. So aren't we in the same boat?
You're right. There's a chicken and egg problem. The same music, it's the same music, just quieter. You're not recovering the dynamics that the mastering engineer destroyed. But you're sending a message. If everyone does it, you're saying, hey, it doesn't do any good to turn it up. You're just going to make the music sound worse. And that's what that's what we have to do. We have to kind of do the chicken and egg. We turn it on, and they say, well, I guess it's not working.
Yeah. One of the things that's come out of this is, the question is, do you normalize each track, or do you do it per album, so you preserve original flow of dynamics in the tracks that the album's producers have done to preserve the musical flow? And if you normalize each track, you would actually destroy that. Yesterday becomes as loud as 8 days a week. So loudness normalization applied to albums, probably, if that's how you can play your music as complete albums, is the way to go.
And that is how we do it.
Yeah.
You should respect what if the mastering engineer wanted a track to sound quiet, it should sound quiet when you listen to that album.
Yeah. By the way, because I'm old-fashioned, I don't apply any loudness normalization. I just do a lot of music on the subway because I have an hour commute each way, and I just turn the volume up or down, which is what your software does for me.
So we have time for one more question. Does anybody have a super awesome question they'd like to ask? Grand finale? No more questions?
Gordon would like to talk about DSD and why he likes it so much.
This is not going to be a hot-headed, controversial panel. This is a productive panel.
Nobody spoke about the implementation in the hardware and or software, how that's being rolled out in terms of the...
Yeah, how R20... Yeah, but is it I guess the question was, do hardware and software companies need to be working together to get this rollout to be successful? R128.
No. Mastering engineers need to understand it. They need to know that they shouldn't crush the dynamics, but I think they will. You know, this education, just us talking about it, is helpful.
So, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, I can tell you, I don't work with everybody, but I can tell you, Bernie Grunman, Chris Bellman, Kevin, Doug Sachs. I mean, this loudness thing is the bane of their existence. It really is. They hate it. They do it when they're absolutely forced under duress to do it. But it's not something they want to do at all. I mean, there probably are bad mastering engineers that don't give a damn as long as they get paid. But the better ones that we all know, they hate it.
Well, listen, I want to thank you guys for coming on this panel today, and I'd like to thank everybody in the audience for attending, and I hope, I guess we should give a big round of applause, not for the panel yet, but for Marjorie. This is the 10th anniversary of Rocky Mountain Audio Fest, and she's not here right now, but she kicked this off. She got the audio festival vibe going around the country again after it had sat dormant for years. So I want to give a round of applause to Marjorie and her crew. And a round of applause for everybody on the panel as well. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. So go drink beer and listen to hi-fi.